Just a year after being elected to office, Egypt's President Mohamed Morsi is now under house arrest, and turmoil has returned to the streets of Cairo. CCTV's Sweeling Nan has the story.
Tahrir Square. From here, he claimed his victory and took its downfall, both with the help of Egypt's powerful military. On June 30, the first anniversary of Mohamed Morsi's election as Egypt's first democratically elected president, millions of Egyptians took to the streets against him. The next day, the military gave Morsi a 48-hour ultimatum to meet the demands of the opposition, stepping down and holding an election to find his replacement.
If the people's demands are not achieved before the agreed period of time, then it is the duty of the military, based on its patriotic and historical responsibilities and out of respect for the demands of the glorious people of Egypt, to announce a roadmap for the future.
On July 3rd, Morsi was deposed and detained, as were other Muslim Brotherhood leaders. Late in the afternoon, armored vehicles rolled out of military bases across the country to take up positions in city squares and government offices. The one-year-old Egyptian constitution was suspended. A new draft for referendum is to be developed within weeks. The Supreme Court will issue a new electoral law to allow early parliamentary and presidential elections. On July 4th, Ali Mansour, a Supreme Court judge, was sworn in as Egypt's interim president. Meanwhile, 300 arrest warrants have been issued for members of the Muslim Brotherhood. On July 9th, a new prime minister was appointed. Nearly all of Egypt's political parties, even the Salafists, former allies of Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood party, have endorsed this roadmap. The Brotherhood now stands alone, refusing to be a part of transition in Egypt, demanding that Morsi be reinstated to the office immediately.
We will increase the protests, we will increase the sit-ins. There's only more determination on the ground here, more sorrow in people's hearts, more tear in their eyes, but it's still the same objective. We will not let this country be robbed again by the military junta.
Egypt has historically been an ally of the West and a gatekeeper of Mideast politics. The United States donates $1.3 billion in military aid to Egypt each year, and the European Union is Egypt's biggest civilian donor. Both have refrained from calling the army's removal of Morsi a coup. Such a label would likely result in sanctions against Egypt, a country of vital strategic importance, sitting at the crossroads of 3 continents and bordering Israel.
What is clear right now is that although Mr. Morsi was elected democratically, there's more work to be done to create the conditions in which everybody feels that their voices are heard and that the government is responsive and truly representative. And so what we've encouraged the government to do is to reach out to the opposition.
Earlier this week, the White House said that cutting off aid to Egypt immediately would not be in the best interest of the United States.
We are taking the time necessary to make the determination about what happened and what to label it, if you will. And we will work with Congress on that and on the issue of further assistance.
On Monday, more than 50 supporters of Egypt's ousted president were killed in clashes with security forces. This marks one of the deadliest single episodes of violence in more than 2.5 years of turmoil in Egypt. Sweeling Nan, CCTV.
CCTV correspondent Jack Barton joins us now from Tahrir Square in Cairo. And Jack, thanks for being on the broadcast. It seems like in the news business we tend to see things in absolutes, pretty black and white. So it's kind of come to this point where it's the pro-Morsi camp or the anti-Morsi camp. And obviously things are far more nuanced than that. So can you give me a sense of how many, just in terms of a percentage, how many people there in Egypt really support what the military has done there?
Well, it's very hard to get a true idea because, of course, no polls have been done, and it depends who you speak to. If you talk to the people back here in Tahrir Square, they say that it is the majority of Egyptians and the army has backed their will. But you speak to some other people and they say Egypt has had 2 coups, one of which was supported by almost everybody, and the most recent one, which was supported about half of the population. Now, what is not in doubt is that Mr. Morsi did bring in many draconian programs. He essentially seized control of the judiciary, the legislative branch, and the media. And he also put Muslim Brotherhood members in many top jobs. It angered many people. But I've spoken to as many people here that said, I did vote for him and I'm glad that the army kicked him out, as people who say, no, I didn't vote for him, I don't like the Muslim Brotherhood, but I would have liked to have seen him voted out of office. So it's a murky picture, but judging by the tens of thousands of people we've seen out on the streets, it is fair to say that quite clearly a very sizable portion of the population still supports Mr. Morsi.
And the Muslim Brotherhood, for what I would assume are obvious reasons, not really buying into this transition, this roadmap to transition. How much political influence do they actually have there in Egypt?
Right now, they don't have really any political influence. Their agenda has been stopped in its tracks. They were offered token jobs in the interim government, but they rejected that. And you know, their leaders have been arrested. Many have been arrested. There are arrest warrants out for other leaders, including Supreme Leader Mohammed Badir. Their headquarters has been shut down. Their media outlet has been shut down. And there really has been quite a tough suppression by the military on the Muslim Brotherhood. Quite clearly a strategy looking forward to ensure that when the military and their political allies roll out their agenda, which leads to election, the Muslim Brotherhood are going to find it very difficult to participate in that agenda. So clearly somewhere down the track there will be elections, there will be a government in place, but because they have been completely alienated from the political process now, many people here in Egypt are going to see whoever is elected as an illegitimate government.
And can there be progress towards reforms if they're not brought into the process?
Well, when we talk about reforms, of course, the Muslim Brotherhood say their Islamist agenda was a reform agenda. That agenda has been stopped. Again, it's going to come down to the reforms of the military and their allies. Now, that's not a completely liberal reformist agenda. It is still based on a strong foundation of Islam. One of the army's partners is the Al-Nur party. That is a very conservative party. What they really want to fix, though, is something that Mr. Morsi completely failed, and that is to revitalize the economy. So that is the one thing that really many Egyptians want. But again, as long as the Muslim Brotherhood are locked out of this process, as long as they can't participate in whatever electoral process emerges from this roadmap that's been laid out, in the eyes of so many Egyptians, that government will be illegitimate.
And of course, it's the holy month of Ramadan. How is that going to factor into things?
Well, everybody is observing Ramadan. They are fasting during the daytime. But of course, Ramadan is supposed to be about peace, about unity, about forgiveness. There's not a lot of that in Egypt right now. But people tell me it's not just this year. They say the past 3 Ramadans have been the same, tense periods. It really hasn't been a sort of a festive or a uniting period at all. They are hoping that the Ramadan next year will be different, but it certainly seems that this year we're going to have a month of more protests, more strife, certainly a very somber mood.
On another, another point of interest there, Human Rights Watch now reporting hundreds of women have been attacked, raped since June 30th there in the square below you. How is that being allowed to happen, and why?
It's an absolutely horrific situation. Just in the 4 days leading up to Morsi's ousting, there were more than 90 brutal sexual assaults officially reported in the square just behind me. Some of those were by dozens of men that lasted for over an hour, and it's just in that crush of numbers. They have got volunteer groups together now. They wear these brightly colored jackets, but most of them are young boys, some as young as 14. I went down there the other day to try and watch them protect the women, and I saw 5 fights just amongst the boys. So in the daytime, they are providing a little bit of security, but at night, when the numbers come down, there's not much that they can really do. When we see the big protests, that is the really dangerous period. But despite all of this, despite all of the intimidation, we're still seeing many women turning up to these protests.
Jack Barton speaking to us from Cairo. Thanks so much.